Welcome to This Explainer. Close your eyes for just a second and imagine a place of absolute perfect peace. Well, today we're diving into a story of unimaginable natural contrast. It's a story that starts in a hidden, beautiful paradise and ends with a locked room mystery so strange it completely baffled the world's top scientists. We're going to unpack an event where the Earth itself unleashed a silent, invisible fury. Let's step into this valley and figure out exactly what happened.
Picture this, far away from the noise of the industrial world, tucked deep inside the lush, rolling hills of Cameroon in West Africa, there was a valley that felt, well, totally untouched by time. The air there was incredible, sweet, carrying this rich, earthy scent of fertile volcanic soil. And sitting right in the center of it all was Lake Nyos. It was a literal masterpiece. We're talking crystal clear, sapphire blue water that reflected the passing clouds like a giant, flawless mirror. Local farmers would wake up with the sun to graze these healthy, fat cattle on the bright green slopes. Kids ran through the tall grass, their laughter just echoing off the steep crater walls, while women wove baskets down by the shore. It was the definition of idyllic, everyday peace.
But, every paradise has its shadows. The local elders, the keepers of the area's ancient oral traditions, they always looked at that deep blue water with a real sense of unease. They actually warned people about malevolent water spirits living deep beneath the surface. Spirits that, if they were ever angered, would rise up just to steal the breath of the living. Now, modern developers completely dismiss this, right? They thought, oh, it's just silly campfire tales to keep mischievous kids from swimming too far out. But as we'll see, science often discovers that ancient myths are just terrifying realities dressed up in the language of magic. The elders hit the nail on the head. There absolutely was a monster sleeping at the bottom of Lake Nyos. Part 1. The Invisible Trap. The Science of a Crater Lake. Okay, so let's look past that beautiful blue meter and dive down into the lightless depths to understand the actual science here. Because Lake Nyos is definitely not your average lake. It plunges over 680 feet deep, straight down into the Earth's crust. And because of the warm tropical climate above, the water gets divided into these really strict layers that almost never mix. The top layer is warmed up by the African sun, so it creates this buoyant, comfortable, totally safe blanket. But the bottom layer? It's freezing cold, pitch dark, and incredibly dense. And here's the kicker. Right beneath that bottom layer, the Earth's magma chamber had been slowly, silently exhaling pure carbon dioxide directly into the water for hundreds of years. The absolutely crucial thing to understand here is this concept of a pressure trap. Normally, gas in water just forms bubbles, right? They float up to the top and pop harmlessly. No big deal. But the sheer depth of Lake Nyos created a physical prison. The immense crushing pressure forced all that carbon dioxide to completely dissolve right into the freezing water. It just packed it tighter and tighter, decade after decade. Think of it like a colossal bottle of soda. You shake it up violently, and all that pressure is just trapped under the cap, waiting for the absolute slightest movement to blow. It was a geological time bomb. Which brings us to part 2. August 21st, 1986, the night the valley went silent. Thursday, August 21st, 1986. It started out just like any other damp day during the rainy season. As the sun set and painted the sky in these deep shades of violet, families in the settlements gathered around glowing kerosene lamps. They were eating their usual evening meals, roasted corn, some yams. Mothers were tucking their kids into bed. Everything was perfectly, wonderfully normal. And then, at exactly 9:30 p.m., the peace was shattered. A low, terrifying rumble echoed through the valley. It sounded like a muffled, distant explosion. We still don't know exactly what did it. Maybe a tiny earthquake, a small landslide, or just a sudden temperature drop. But something triggered the lake. That freezing bottom layer of water was suddenly pushed upward. And in an instant, the immense physical prison holding decades of pressurized gas just vanished. The lake violently exploded from the inside out. It shot a massive fountain of water and white foam literally 300 feet up into the pitch-black sky. But the water wasn't the real threat. Along with the water, the lake violently exhaled its ancient breath.
1.2 cubic kilometers of pure carbon dioxide was released in seconds. Let's put that into perspective for a second. Imagine over 300,000 tons of invisible gas instantly materializing out of nowhere into the night air. Now, because carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen, this massive cloud didn't just float away into the atmosphere. It stayed down. It formed a suffocating invisible blanket 160 feet thick. Like a ghostly avalanche, it poured right over the crater's lip and hurtled down toward the sleeping villages at almost 30 miles per hour. As it rolled into the valleys, it violently shoved all the breathable oxygen right out of its path. It crept under doors, seeped through woven windows, and because it's completely colorless and odorless, the people inside had absolutely zero warning. Suddenly, kerosene lamps just flickered and died in the oxygen-starved air, plunging homes into total darkness. Victims suddenly smelled the sharp, metallic odor of rotten eggs, which was actually just a hallucination from their shocked nervous systems, and they lost consciousness before they could even stand up. Families slumped over their dinner tables, cattle collapsed out in the fields, even the birds fell like stones from the branches. In just minutes, over 1,700 people and 3,500 animals suffocated in the dark. And then, a profound, heavy silence settled over the valley. Part 3. The Eerie Aftermath. A Locked Room Mystery.
The next morning, the sun came up, totally oblivious to the nightmare it was shining on. A young survivor named Ephraim Che, who happened to live high up on a cliff above the gas line, woke up to a terrible silence. There were no roosters crowing, no neighbors talking. As he walked down into the village, he discovered a scene that defied all logic. When first responders finally arrived, they were paralyzed by confusion. I mean, these people were trained for wars, for disease outbreaks, but this was the ultimate locked room mystery. The buildings and infrastructure were perfectly intact. The kerosene lamps were unlit, but the glass wasn't broken and they were completely full of fuel. There were absolutely no signs of struggle, no blood, no visible trauma on anyone. Wild rumors started spreading about secret chemical weapons or some fast-acting hemorrhagic fever. But the most chilling clue of all was waiting back up the mountain. That beautifully clear sapphire water of Lake Nyos, it was gone. The lake had turned a terrifying murky shade of blood red.
It didn't take long for geologists to piece the puzzle together. That intense force of the massive gas release, which is a super rare phenomenon called a limnic eruption, had violently churned up deep, iron-rich soil from the very bottom of the lake. When all that deep iron finally hit the oxygen at the surface, it rusted, staining the entire lake red. The invisible serial killer wasn't a bomb, and it wasn't a virus. It was the Earth itself.
Part 4. Disarming the Deadly Lake, Preventing Another Tragedy.
So this discovery sent absolute shockwaves through the global scientific community because they realized something terrifying. The lake was already beginning to slowly refill with gas from the magma below. The weapon was basically reloading itself, and they had to act fast. In 2001, a pretty daring team of French and Cameroonian engineers went back to the Red Lake. First, they sank these massive, heavy plastic pipes directly down into the deepest trenches of the crater. This was incredibly dangerous, by the way. One wrong move, and they could trigger another eruption right beneath their boats. Next, they pumped just a small amount of that deep water upwards. This sudden decrease in pressure caused the dissolved gas to bubble out furiously, which triggered a natural self-sustaining geyser. It's brilliant. Today, that tube shoots a magnificent fountain of water and gas 150 feet into the air continuously and safely, venting the deadly pressure in small, harmless amounts.
Decades later, those valleys have turned green once more. Families have returned to their ancestral homes, cattle are grazing the hillsides again, and the lake has gone back to its deceptively beautiful crystal blue. But those hissing pipes still stand there. They're a monument to the thousands of lives stolen in the dark. Looking back on the tragedy of Lake Nyos, it leaves us with this really humbling reminder of our fragile place in the natural world. It begs the question, as we continue to build our lives on top of this living, breathing entity we call Earth, are we truly prepared for these silent, unimaginable furies our planet can unleash? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating, heartbreaking event with me.